Hello and welcome to The Insider, a show designed to clue you into the biggest news, events and announcements inside the video games industry, discussing with you some things you may know, some things you may not, and the glue that holds it all together is a little bit of my own opinion. My name is Paul James, thank you very much for watching, and let's kick off another episode. So the Super Nintendo Classic, or SNES Classic, has recently released. Many people who had their pre-orders have picked it up. There were many people who missed out on picking up a pre-order for the console, and consequently are now only just getting their consoles or are still waiting. This episode of The Insider this week is dedicated to the SNES Classic and 7 games that you should be basically cracking into first as soon as you pick up your unit. So first up on our list of 7 is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. The Legend of Zelda franchise has a long and storied history, culminating most recently in Breath of the Wild for the Nintendo Switch. Link to the Past is possibly, in my mind, the game that drove so much of the change, so many of the ideas that we now see perforated through many different Zelda games, perhaps excluding Breath of the Wild. The Link to the Past had the light and the dark world, it had close to a dozen dungeons, it had so many little optional pathways that you could go on. Aspects that were drawn upon in the original Legend of Zelda as well, but refined and polished to an impressive sheen in the case of Link to the Past. Be sure to play this game should you be picking up a Nintendo Classic. Depending on who you speak to, you're going to get a variety of different responses when it comes to best Mario game. Many will suggest Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo as being the pick of the Mario games, and in some cases, the best game ever made. There's good reason for this. Really polished gameplay, some of the ideas that we'd seen in every release up to Super Mario Bros. 3 all come together in this amazing package. Yoshi's in there, there's new mechanics, the levels are perfect, there are so many amazing things about this game that, again, depending on who you speak to, some will justify this Mario game as being the best ever made. Super Mario World, make sure you play that when you get your Super Nintendo Classic. There's some things that people don't like about Yoshi's Island. The screeching Mario, that's certainly one of them. But if you can isolate that particular aspect, which does turn the volume down if that's a concern, if you can isolate that one point from it, Yoshi's Island or Super Mario Bros. 3, there's a million titles there involved with Yoshi's Island. Yoshi's Island is one of the finest games ever made in my opinion. Touch Fuzzy Get Dizzy, one of the most iconic levels ever made in a video game. Certainly the trippiest thing out of Nintendo as well. Yoshi's Island, first kind of really major deviation from the established Mario formula in terms of the platforming space, so we've obviously seen your Dr. Mario's and those sorts of things already. In terms of traditional 2D platforming, first deviation from the typical formula there, but Yoshi's Island is amazing. Firing eggs, some really clever platforming and puzzles, maybe on the slightly easy side, but an amazing game and one that is well worth playing should you be picking up a Super Nintendo Classic. fourth game I'm going to be talking about today is an interesting selection. The reason for this being that there's a remake, a totally polished new version of the game that is coming in February next year for PS4 and Vita. Secret of Mana is one of those 21 games bundled on the Super Nintendo Classic, and it is one of the best action RPGs ever made. If you're already a fan of this franchise, go back and play it anyway, and then get yourself psyched for the upcoming remake. If you're yet to have played a Secret of Mana game, please make sure you do so. It's simple, accessible, but it has that depth that makes RPGs, especially those of that era, so incredible. Please play Secret of Mana on your Super Nintendo Classic. Depending on which Final Fantasy fan you speak to, Final Fantasy VI might be discussed as being the best game in the franchise to date. They're wrong. Final Fantasy IX is the pinnacle, no questions asked. However, Final Fantasy VI is an incredible game, establishing some of the best storytelling, best gameplay mechanics, best combat, best world and character design. Everything about Final Fantasy VI oozes class. It had me consumed for hundreds of hours when I was a young kid, and the fact that if you've not played Final Fantasy VI, now is the perfect opportunity. Please make sure to pick up a Super Nintendo Classic and get that game into your life. It is one of the best RPGs ever made, certainly one of the best on the Super Nintendo. Westerners have been clamouring for a sequel to Earthbound, or a new game released in the West of the Mother franchise, for decades. Earthbound came out on the Super Nintendo, Mother 3 came out for the Game Boy Advance, it never got released in the West. People are still clamouring for more from that franchise, and Nintendo acknowledges it a little bit by throwing NES and various other aspects of the Mother franchise into Super Smash Bros. Regularly. Earthbound is an incredible RPG that's got a wonderful sense of humour, and it is so endearing. Please make sure to pick up Earthbound on the Super Nintendo Classic. It is an amazing game. The final main game for discussion today is Super Metroid. I only got introduced to this game properly about a year ago, courtesy of the Video Games Club and Jay specifically, and I loved it. The atmosphere is incredible, the platforming amazing, the shooting perfect. Everything about Super Metroid oozes class. It just highlights the incredible vein of form that Nintendo was in back in the Super Nintendo era. Please, if you've not played Super Metroid, like I hadn't up until a year ago, this is the golden opportunity to play it, so please get it. So those were the top 7 games that I couldn't recommend any higher that you play, given that hopefully you're picking up a Super Nintendo Classic. There's a bunch of other games that I couldn't give the same amount of time to today, including Donkey Kong Country, including Mario RPG, Kirby, Star Fox 1, and of course, more of a look behind the curtain, not because it's a brilliant game, but by playing the first level in Star Fox 1, you unlock the never before released Star Fox 2 on this Nintendo Classic. Please make sure that you consider playing that game because it is an amazing piece of history that no one has properly had the opportunity to play before. Otherwise, enjoy the amazing games that are on this console. There's some sad omissions. Chrono Trigger, one of the best games ever made, not there for some reason. But there is so many amazing games that I've highlighted here in this episode and others that I haven't had a chance to cite that are well worth playing. And if you consider yourself a massive gamer and you've not played a Super Nintendo before, these are some of the best games to go to that will expand your horizons incredibly. That wraps up another episode of The Insider. For more, please make sure to like, share and subscribe down below. You can catch up with weekly episodes of The Insider, of Patched, The Video Games Club, Player 2 Plays, and a whole bunch more content that can only be found if you subscribe to the channel. Make sure to visit the website, player2.net.au, where you can catch up with all the awesome written content. It is review season now, with a lot of the big AAAs and indies all hitting at the moment. So there's so much content available that you can, again, only find at the site. So please make sure to bookmark it and check it out because there's reviews, previews, features, and a whole bunch more, again, that can only be found at player2.net.au. Please make sure to catch us on Twitter, player2au for the site, Paul James P2 for myself, and otherwise, thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.